Okay. I'm doing a talk on Handshake. It is a decentralized permissionless root zone. Uh, since we're doing intros real quick, I used to do recursive and authoritative DNS for money. Now I do them for fun. And instead I do security for money. I did consult a bit with the Handshake development team, though I was not part of the development team, trying to help them figure out all the twisty maze passages inside of DNS and make sure things work properly. That said, I'm not, as I said, part of the Handshake project or developer, and my employer doesn't care about any of this. All right, so we've talked a little bit today about the root. Everybody knows, IANA publishes a root, sends it out to 12 or so organizations that operate 13 nodes of like 1,400 servers worldwide. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. There's no problems whatsoever. So thank you for coming to my TED Talk. In reality, when you start peering at the actual packets on the internet, you discover that the root itself is quite fractured. It's not as wonderful as we all like to believe. Everything from some of the presentations we've seen earlier of private use, adding and removing TLDs within your own network, adding filtering, content protection, things like that, to people that run routes not necessarily because they want to, but because they're trying to bolt on their own TLDs and get people to use them, either to get money or nerd cred. But there's also some larger efforts in this area. Russia is, I think, the predominant example with their national domain name system. Whereas they're deploying servers to internet exchanges within Russia and slowly but surely encouraging domestic ISPs to use those instead. This is for the intention of having sovereignty within their DNS. If the DNS system were interrupted by an external or internal actor, they obviously still want their internet to work, and I think that's a very reasonable concern. However, it does introduce a lot of challenges when you sort of fork the root. There's other efforts like Yeti DNS, which started off as a very well-intentioned IPv6 testbed. They are publishing the ICANN root, but as Paul so eloquently put it, Yeti DNS is basically a blueprint for anybody who wants to build their own alternative route. Now, to avoid taking him out of context, Mr. Vixie obviously believes in the one true ICANN route, as did I for a really long time. And I think there was this perception that if you just ignored alternative routes, they would just go away. In 2006, ICANN had the Security and Stability Committee do a in-depth paper on alternative routes and fractured routes. And what they found was that things like sovereignty and financial models and poor internationalization were basically the reasons why people built their own root services. And 10 plus years later, they were exactly true as to why all these things happened. So when you start breaking up the root or trying to do your own shenanigans within the root or subsequent zones, users sort of get stuck in this really weird spot. As a recursive operator, whether you're running something like Quad9 or AdGuard, a hosted service or shipping software down to people, you're inherently making a technical decision that is also a political decision. You're deciding, I am going to throw the weight of my user's eyeballs behind the ICANN root or central NIC or whoever you decide to use. Or that decision may be made for you in the case of certain countries, where either there's a coordinated effort to establish an alternative route, or there's, as we've heard, efforts to censor or modify queries in flight. And as we heard from the local zones presentation, it's quite complicated for users to get the root zone down to their machines to run it themselves, and doing so securely. We have to depend on things like TSIG. And sort of in this environment, you look around and you say, okay, well, here's all these options for where to send root queries. And, for whatever reason, I don't like what any of these people are doing. Your one and only solution is to build your own new island, right? And further fragment the ecosystem. A good example of this is the root server operators issued a statement earlier, I think this year, that transport encryption is a great idea, and we take no opinion on it, which is the really nice way of saying that the root servers are not going to be supporting DNS crypt anytime soon. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable decision for them to make, because they are in a position where availability is the most important feature, and they can't be the beta testers for cool new stuff. And they have to worry about things like massive DDoS attacks, et cetera, et cetera. So again, your only option is, hey, I want routes that support transport security, so I'm just going to build my own new island. But I think there might be a better way to do this. Imagine if you just took the root, or rather the ICANN function, the IANA function, and turned it into effectively an open source project. The motivations behind sticking with the status quo is that there were technical limitations on the number of things that could exist at the root, and that's how we ended up with a hierarchy. But really, computers are a million times faster than they used to be. Those technical limitations no longer apply, and it was a good bureaucratic backstop to prevent certain things from happening that they didn't want to have happen. Undue political influence, etc. But what if we just established a good foundation where everybody was on the same level playing field and everybody could contribute and sort of guide the process forward? And I think that's kind of, in a way, what Handshake does. I don't want to come across as wholeheartedly advocating for it. I'm more or less presenting it as a possible technical solution, and I would love to see more people participate and try to figure out how to make it better. But the recipe is generally, the three steps of any good evil plan. Step one: take standard plain RFC compliant DNS, no shenanigans. Pull in all the DNSSEC stuff and pull in Dane, which I'll get to in a minute. And then set DNS on top of a blockchain, right? Rather than sort of the DNSSEC implementation where we bolted DNS inside the protocol, or sorry, where we bolted crypto inside the protocol. You get some interesting properties when you just take DNS and set it on top of the crypto, so to speak. All of your names are rooted in cryptographic keys, so you get some interesting functions where DNSSEC just makes sense from the root. You don't have to have a bunch of guys in long robes meeting up in data centers having key signing ceremonies. And you don't have to worry about, what happens when you lose all the keys, things like that. And and it adds effectively CRUD functionality to the root, rather than petitioning ICANN to create a new TLD. You can just kind of do it yourself. It's taking the same functionality that we figured out works really well within ComNet, Biz, etc., of having a registry, and putting that at the root. And step 3 in the evil plan is always profit. But one of the things that drew me to this project is that nobody really stands to profit from it. It's a bunch of nerds just trying to do the right thing. The auction model is designed so that you only ever have to beat out the next highest bidder, and they have to actually put up money to drive up your bid price. So you can't just be a jerk in an auction. And the spent coins are burned. They don't end up in any particular organization's pockets. And as I mentioned, it's about $100,000 to $200,000 cheaper than going the ICANN route to try and create your own TLDs. I talked a little bit about the advantages, addressing some of the issues that ICANN identified back in 2006, specifically sovereignty. If I decide to invade another country, I can't be punished by the internet. I can't have my ccTLD revoked and pulled out because a bunch of other countries decide that they're mad at me. I can't have my root servers pulled out of my country, the official roots, because of political policies, et cetera, et cetera. And because it's built on top of crypto, everything's signed and verified from the beginning, right? If Germany decides to change their name servers, there's a public ledger, and there's traceability and accountability back to those keys that actually says this was exactly what the holder of these keys decided to do. And being the whole peer-to-peer wonderfulness, unless you try really, really hard, your local node will generally always work. You'll have a cryptographically verified copy of the root sitting on your local machine if you so choose. And the governance becomes decentralized. This was one of my gripes with the ICANN process was I wanted .Mike D. I thought it'd be really cool to have my own TLD. Not only was it going to cost me $200,000, they basically laughed when I wasn't a representative of an organization or a large brand. Individuals are effectively locked out of the process. And the other thing I really liked about Handshake was they really sat down and thought through how do we make this a viable proposal going forward. It wasn't just a cryptocurrency, how do we make a bunch of money real quick type thing. They sat down and figured out, like, okay, Discord, for example, probably should have .discord just to avoid confusing customers or internet users at large. And so we're going to pre-allocate, I think it's like the Alexa top 100,000 of name labels to those organizations. And it encourages you to implement DNSSEC and publish a proof, and then you get ownership of that particular name. If you operate a local node, your queries don't end up at the root. We don't have to worry about QName minimization and caching and things like that. I mentioned censorship resistance, and because we have this cryptographic foundation, and as soon as you stick Dane into the mix, you end up with a model where if the browsers would support it, you could effectively ditch certificate authorities, which I think is going to be the next major move in privacy and security, is ditching central authorities. And the part I was particularly excited about helping with was making sure it was completely backwards compatible. It doesn't quack any different than most DNS servers do, behave sanely, and existing ccTLDs and whatever can go in and claim their things on the blockchain. get them working, and everything just works. Even if you don't fully embrace it, you can at least claim it and have some idea what's going on. And the big advantage over Tor and things like that is you do end up with human readable name labels. All right, and if you're interested in learning more, handshake.org is sort of the site to go to. There's also the Handshake Alliance, which is all the companies that have decided to start building stuff on top of the chain. And then Bob Wallet is sort of your go-to wallet and name management. And as with most crypto projects, if you hop on Telegram, there's a bunch of super helpful users and developers that will get you pointed in the right direction. That said, I'll answer a couple questions. Like I said, if you have other questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I can at least get you in contact with smart people that know more than I do. So let's see. What happens if someone compromises your blockchain wallet? Do you just lose your namespace forever? Like those who have lost Bitcoin wallets, this also applies to punishment arguments. Political entities can still exert force against administrators and operators. Yeah, so you are required to maintain escrow of your, or you're required to maintain control of your keys, just like DNSSEC and Bitcoin and whatever. If you lose your keys, you sort of lose your ability to prove I am really who I say I am. There is no good solution to, hey, I totally lost all my keys and I didn't have any backups. And I think that's sort of an intrinsic problem with when you're proving verifiably that you are who you say you are. Yeah, I wish there was a better answer, but that's just sort of that's sort of the way it is. Why did you decide to build something new instead of building on Namecoin? Namecoin. So, like I said, I'm not a developer of Handshake, but Namecoin solves a completely different problem. Namecoin is like registering a .com domain. You end up with a name under, I think it's .bit or something. This Handshake is more of a drop-in replacement for the root and addressing all of the administrative issues around the root, rather than it is a solution for end users to get name labels, but it's yeah. I mean, if you're just an end user and you want to register a domain, you could do that, but that's not the core target of the solving the problem. Do the registrations expire so that they can change ownership? Yes. Every year they expire. You can always renew at the same price as what you paid to acquire it originally. How does Dane allow your system to bypass certificate authorities? Well, if the browsers just start looking to Dane rather than the CA chain, and you're publishing the records for Dane within Handshake or within your authoritatives that are DNSSEC signed, you can use the validation chain rooted in your wallet keys to prove Dane, rather than depending on the entire chain from ICANN on up. So I think that's all the questions.